Welcome back to another FPL video. Today I'm going to be discussing my Game Week 3 team selection, recapping on how I did in Game Week 2 before talking about my transfer plans ahead of the upcoming deadline. It's going to be another Friday one, so be sure to tune in for the deadline stream and it will be a pleasure to have you on there as well. We're around 20 subscribers away from 19,000, so be sure to keep on smashing the subscribe button, liking the video, sharing this around as well with those that love FPL and UCL Fantasy. And with that game live, there's going to be more content headed your way. Without further ado, let's jump straight into this video. There was a lot of debate in Game Week 2 about Onana versus Turner. Who do we start? And in the end, they both got 2 points. I think Onana is better for saves and bonus points, but I thought Spurs would score multiple goals against Man United. And with Matt Turner, I thought he had a better chance of a clean sheet. In the end, he didn't keep one, and Sheffield United always managed to score a goal against Nottingham Forest somehow, and this is my main issue with those of you that might want to go for Turner and Areola as your 2 4 million goalkeepers. Neither team has kept a clean sheet so far this season, and I don't expect either of them to keep that many clean sheets in the long run, so I would always recommend having a more reliable option, at least at 4.5 million, and then you can have this backup, either Turner or Areola. I wouldn't trust having both of them as your goalkeepers to rotate throughout the whole campaign. The first clean sheet any of my defenders have kept this season was through Saliba against Crystal Palace, and he also managed to get 2 bonus points and 8 overall, so a really solid return from Saliba. He made a mistake in the first half but quickly made up for it with a superb tackle, and if he got that maybe a split second wrong or he just mistimed it, he would have conceded a penalty and Arsenal would have been in big trouble from that stage in the game. But Saliba, I think, looks a bit shakier without Gabriel next to him, and Arsenal defensively are even more solid with the Brazilian centre-back, and I would still expect him to come back into the side. But I admit, I got it wrong. I thought he would come back in straight away, and he was such an integral part to the Arsenal team last season, and also in the years gone by. He pretty much always starts for Mikel Arteta, but it seems like Arteta wants to change things up a little bit depending on the opposition, and that's why we could get some surprise rotation like we occasionally see with Pep Guardiola and Manchester City, so that could be a big issue in the future. But as things stand, it looks like Saliba is nailed on and will start the vast majority of games in the Premier League. And the same can be said for Ben Chilwell, but he's always going to be an injury-prone player. And he also came off very early on against West Ham, which was very surprising because you look at how impressive he was yet again, and he was Chelsea's best source of creativity alongside Raheem Sterling. I think those were the 2 shining lights for Chelsea from an offensive perspective. Enzo Fernandes had another good game but missed the penalty, and Chelsea still leave a lot to be desired in front of goal. They have scored in both games so far, but they are capable of scoring many more goals, but their finishing is just lacking, and they also sometimes defend pretty poorly, and that's why I'm not too keen on doubling up on Chelsea defensively. I think Chilwell is enough. Despite the great upcoming fixtures, I really wouldn't be too tempted to go for Colwill, Sanchez or Gusto. I'm not saying they're bad options, and they could provide some decent clean sheet potential, but the main appeal behind Ben Chilwell isn't the clean sheets, it's the combination of everything, especially in the goals and assist threat. And the same can definitely be said for Pervis Estupiñán, who got a goal and assist against Wolves. He ended up conceding, and I think he got a yellow card as well, but an 11-pointer, and Estupiñán will get plenty of yellow cards this season. He might frustrate you from time to time. There are some poor fixtures coming up until Game Week 9, but I'm still very happy to keep him in that period. I can sometimes rotate him, have him on my bench, and I think he'll do a great job for me regardless. The midfield was by far the most disappointing part of my team. Bukayo Saka blanked against Crystal Palace, and he had a decent performance overall, but didn't really threaten to score or assist. And when Arsenal won the penalty, it was Martin Odegaard who stepped up, and he asked Saka if he could take it. Saka accepted, and Odegaard has been in terrific penalty goal-scoring form throughout pre-season. And Saka also scored his last penalty against Man City in the Community Shield, but I think Odegaard was maybe a bit more convincing, and also he has scored multiple goals throughout the pre-season. So this could be an issue going into the future. I still think Saka could regain penalties at some point, but he has been a bit shakier in terms of penalties with some of his recent shots, and he probably has a lot of baggage, of course, with the Euros final from a few years ago. But I still like Saka a lot, and it's just not going to be very easy to separate him, Odegaard and Martinelli by the end of the season. It will be like the last campaign, I think, where maybe 10, 20 points will separate the three depending on injuries, and Saka is the most nailed of them all alongside Odegaard, and you could argue Odegaard is the best of the bunch because of bonus points and also the assist potential. But I think Saka, in terms of goals and assists combined, he is going to have the highest amount of any Arsenal player. Then we go on to Martinelli, and I have to say he was a bit more frustrating than Bukayo Saka, because in the opening minutes of that game against Crystal Palace, Kai Havertz found him in a really good spot, and Martinelli took a bit too long to take the shot, and he really could have done much better with his opportunity. And apart from that, I don't think he really threatened at all in that game, and he was sopped off very early on after Tomiyasu got sent off, and Arsenal needed to put more defenders on the pitch like Gabriel, who came on for his fellow Gabriel and Brazilian there. I still like Martinelli a lot. He is 8 million, but I think on a wild card, I would be more open to moving to a Phil Foden, a Luis Diaz, which maybe before the season began, I wouldn't have been anticipating, that sort of switch this early on in the season. I'm not saying I'm going to make that switch ahead of Fulham at home. I definitely would recommend it. But on a wild card, I think there's definitely a valid argument to not go for a double up in Arsenal in the midfield and instead diversify it with Diaz, Foden, Mitoma, Mbeumo. You've got Saka as well. And even a Man United asset could still be worth it, but definitely not a double up. And speaking of which, Bruno Fernandes, he has had some really good numbers in the first 2 game weeks, but no returns so far. That's the most important thing. His creativity has been fantastic, especially since the beginning of last season, but the assists aren't really coming there. He got 9 assists in the last campaign, but he really should have gotten 15 plus with the creativity he provided. And once again, he created a great chance for Marcus Rashford. It really should have been taken. And then Bruno Fernandes found himself with a golden opportunity as well, and he also mishit it, and they really should have scored against Spurs. I think they were actually pretty good in the first half, but going into the second, Man United definitely tailed off and Spurs deserved the victory. Marcus Rashford is someone I definitely wouldn't sell ahead of Nottingham Forest. I think he's got 2 goals and 3 assists in 3 matches against Nottingham Forest, and this was all from last season, and Man United didn't concede a single goal against them, and they also scored 2 plus on each occasion. So I definitely would recommend keeping Bruno Fernandes and Rashford if you can for at least one more game week, and then going into game week 4, I would definitely trim them down and only have one Man United attacker as they face Arsenal. The final midfielder in my starting 11 is another one with poor upcoming fixtures, and that is Mitoma. He produced a 12-pointer against Wolverhampton Wanderers, and he produced a sensational solo goal, also got an assist to make things even better. And despite the poor upcoming fixtures, he's cheap. He plays in one of the best attacking teams in the league, and I'd be fairly happy to keep him. There could be the odd benching here and there, but I've got the squad depth, I think, to cover for that. And I still like a double up in Brighton. Would I triple up with the upcoming fixtures? No, I definitely wouldn't. But having 1 or 2 Brighton players is still definitely something I would advise to all of you. And I wouldn't look too much into the fixtures, because otherwise you might miss out on many points and goals, which I still think Brighton will score in this upcoming period. So a very disappointing showing from my midfield, with the obvious exception of Mitoma. I was expecting Erling Haaland to score and for Man City to win by 2 goals, probably a 2-0 victory. And I was a bit surprised to see them only score once and for the game to be so tight in terms of the scoreline. But Man City still deserved the victory. They controlled most of the game, and they're such a hard team to break down. But with Erling Haaland, he is still a fantastic captaincy option, of course, in most game weeks. And my policy is to captain him whenever he's at home, and also in any away fixture versus maybe bottom half sides or teams that I anticipate to finish in the bottom half, like a Burnley in game week 1. But facing Sheffield United next, I'm sorry to say, Erling Haaland is still the standout captaincy option, and whilst you can go against him, there are some viable alternatives like Rashford, Bruno Fernandes, Saka and Martinelli. I still think Erling Haaland is number 1 in Game Week 3 in terms of the captaincy, but when he's facing a Newcastle at home, for example, you can start to reconsider, of course, the captaincy. It's not always going to work, and there will be times where you go against him and you're going to be punished very heavily, and he's not even going to return in every single game week. That's another thing that might seem surprising, but that's the way it goes. And he's still got more Premier League goals than games played. And look, he is just such a sensation in front of goal. But Man City can be neutralised sometimes, or at least Erling Haaland can. And yet they'll still find a way from another player like a Phil Foden, who was man of the match in Game Week 2. The final forward is Ollie Watkins. Another disappointing showing, because he got an assist in a 4-0 victory for Aston Villa. And then you look at the other standout Aston Villa asset in the attack, which is Diaby, and he really should have scored and gotten multiple returns, but that's the way it goes sometimes. And Aston Villa have plenty of quality in the attacking positions, and whilst Watkins and Diaby will still be the highest scoring midfielders and attackers for Aston Villa, you can still sometimes get the odd frustration where other players really come to the fore, like a John McGinn, Douglas Luiz, etc. But I would still back Ollie Watkins in the long term. Despite the next 2 or 3 fixtures not looking the greatest, I still think Watkins will hold up to a Jackson and also to anyone else you can mention like Wissa or Alvarez. I think those are the 4 standout forwards besides Erling Haaland, and maybe there could be a shift to a front 3. Just be careful if you go for a midfield 5 and a front 3, you're going to have a lot of benching headaches in the future, and I will try to avoid that if possible. But let's now talk about the captaincy, my current rank, and then we'll move on to the team selection for Game Week 3. I captain Erling Haaland, and the vice captaincy choices I kind of switch between in Watkins and Saka. They only outscored Haaland by a few points. So in Saka's case, 1 point difference, and Watkins got 3 extra points. Same with those that went for Salah. I thought there would have been a bigger difference, and he would have been my top captaincy choice if I had him. And I think those Salah owners are also a bit unlucky with him missing the penalty yet again. I think that's 3 penalty misses in a row. He also missed against Bournemouth and Arsenal last season towards the end. So that is very frustrating. But in the end, I got 52 points, 137 points overall, and my rank has gone down from 200k to 441k. So I have doubled my rank, and that's not a positive thing for sure. You can also join the league. You can see the league code on the right hand side, 7EG67U, and there is also an auto join link in the description down below, so be sure to check that out. So a bit of a disappointing week for me. In the end though, I think Saliba saved me a little bit because I was down around 600k and at one point even close to 1 million, but I think those bonus points, the clean sheet for Arsenal, definitely helped me despite the frustrations coming from the midfield in Saka and Martinelli. So let's now move on to the team selection portion of this video. I did use 1 free transfer in Game Week 2, so I don't have 2 free transfers available to me right now, and that has played a big part in my decision making. It's a straight shootout between the sticks. Onana versus Turner. They're facing each other in Game Week 3, and I'm going to back Onana. I think that's the obvious choice. I would back Man United to keep the clean sheet, and if it's a narrow victory, Onana could easily be in and amongst the bonus points, and I would expect him to maybe get a save point on top of that. So I think Onana is the standout goalkeeper option this week, despite Man United's poor form in the first 2 game weeks of the season, and I'm very happy to have him, despite obviously the troubles and the concerns going into the future. Man United also had a very poor start to last season, losing to Brighton and Brentford, and then they showed a really good performance in Game Week 3 at home to Liverpool, and this time round it will be Nottingham Forest. So despite how impressive Forest have been, I would back Man United for the win and for Onana to keep a clean sheet. I have 4 solid defenders to choose from, but I'm going for the same back 3. William Saliba at home to Fulham is a pretty decent shout for a clean sheet, but by no means a guarantee. I would actually have more confidence in Arsenal keeping clean sheets away from home, because at the Emirates, they simply don't keep enough. They're maybe a bit more offensive, and as a result, they leave themselves open to transitions, and they can be caught out quite easily. So let's hope that Arsenal solidify things at the back and can keep a clean sheet this time round in this London derby. And Saliba is the best Arsenal defender in terms of bonus points, but as I said in pre-season, what I like about Gabriel is his goal threat, and he actually scored against Fulham last time out after making a mistake which gave Mitrovic the opener, and I would expect Gabriel to get back into the side. Maybe I'm going to be wrong yet again, but that is my prediction. With Tomiyasu currently facing a suspension and with Jurriën Timber missing months of action, I just don't see any other viable alternative unless Arsenal really want to go offensive again and leave themselves very, very vulnerable to a Fulham goal, which definitely could happen this week. Then we go to the other 2 defenders, and Chilwell is the standout in terms of the fixture and also the ceiling. I think he could get a goal, assist and a clean sheet. 3 bonus points. That's definitely all possible. Chilwell is also capable of being very frustrating and giving you 1 or 2 pointers or being subbed off early, but I would expect him to return very well against Luton Town at home, and Chelsea have a great opportunity to start building some momentum, which they haven't been able to do. I can't remember the last time they've won 2 games in a row, but they faced Luton Town at home, then Wimbledon at home in the Carabao Cup. That is a great chance to build some confidence, score some goals, and to get the fans back on side, and Chilwell will be an integral part to that comeback and resurgence for Chelsea. And the final defender is Pervis Estupiñán. Despite West Ham's great performance against Chelsea in the second half, I would back Brighton for the victory. They've got a decent chance of a clean sheet, which they haven't kept so far this season. And Estupiñán has been one of the best left-backs in the country. He has so many different avenues to return, and Brighton are a joy to watch. Surely there's no way that this midfield will disappoint. Bukayo Saka home to Fulham, who have conceded an XG figure of over 2 in both of the first 2 game weeks of the season against Brentford and Everton. And if Arsenal can start to click things in the attack and start to be more free-flowing like they were at the beginning of the last campaign, then surely the likes of Saka have a great chance of returning and potentially matching the likes of Erling Haaland for the captaincy. So I would back Saka to do very well. The same goes for Martinelli and Martin Odegaard. It's so difficult to separate the three of them. If Odegaard is on penalties, you might give him the edge, but I still think Saka will get more goal contributions this season and Martinelli will have the most goals. But so far, it's not looking too good, and Martinelli definitely needs to step things up because in pre-season, he was a bit underwhelming and he hasn't scored a goal yet so far in this Premier League campaign, but I would expect that to change potentially as soon as Game Week 3. And then you look at this double up in the midfield as well, not just with Arsenal, but also with Man United. Marcus Rashford and Bruno Fernandes at home to Nottingham Forest. Rashford has the better record against Nottingham Forest, and Bruno Fernandes only has 1 goal in 4 games against them. But Fernandes is on penalties, and that could also sway things his way, just like Odegaard versus Saka on Monday night. But I would expect Fernandes and Rashford to return well, and if it's a 2-0 victory like I predict, I would be hoping for Fernandes and Rashford to be involved, and that's definitely possible. But Man United just don't seem like they're clicking up front, just like with Arsenal in a way, but United are even worse in this regard as things stand. And to make matters worse, they face each other in Game Week 4, so I definitely want to be looking to sell some of these assets ahead of that big clash next week, and that could be a huge issue for me. So the midfield is actually the area I need to bolster the most. Normally it's the one I tend to get spot on, but there are so many different options this season, and so far the double ups in Arsenal and Man United haven't been as fruitful as we all expected. The final midfielder is Mbeumo. He also has some pretty poor fixtures coming up, so as you can see, my midfield definitely needs some bolstering. Going into Game Week 2, I was talking about my future transfer plans, and back then I was looking to bring in James Maddison and Mbeumo for Mitoma and Bruno Fernandes, and that could still happen at this point. But with Brighton's form, with Mitoma showing absolute quality and consistency, it might be very difficult to part with him, and instead I might get rid of both Man United assets, just not this week. I wouldn't do that ahead of Nottingham Forest at home, but going into Game Week 4, I would definitely be more open to selling both. The front two is also fairly straightforward. Erling Haaland away to Sheffield United. I think he's going to score, and I'd be very surprised if he didn't. Man City should win by 2 or 3 goals at the very least and potentially keep yet another clean sheet. I don't think Sheffield United have been terrible so far despite all of the outgoings, but I think there's clearly a lack of quality in their squad, and Man City should be able to breeze past them, to be quite frank. And I look at Ollie Watkins away to Burnley. This will be much tougher, I think. 2 teams in claret and blue, and it could be much more of a close scoreline. But Ollie Watkins has a good chance of scoring, and I wouldn't trade him for many forwards this week. Maybe Jackson at home to Luton Town or Alvarez away to Sheffield United. But looking at players like Wissa, who look fantastic in the long term, I would expect more of a low-scoring game between Brentford and Crystal Palace. Let's see if I'm completely wrong about that. But I'm very happy with this front two, and I wouldn't change too much of this entire squad on the wildcard. The bench is fairly decent, nothing special. I've got Turner there as my backup goalkeeper. Rico Henry first on my bench just in case he needs to come on. And Baldock and Osula complete that. And Baldock should be back fairly soon. He's got a bit of an injury problem at the moment. And in terms of Formula defenders, I'm not a huge fan of any of them. Bayer included, Bell, Kabore, you name it. But I've got Baldock. And as things stand, Sheffield United aren't conceding too many goals, but I think up against Man City, we might start to worry the worst for them because they could be absolutely battered in this game. And all that's left really to discuss is the captaincy, and I'm going for Erling Haaland as things stand. It seems a bit boring. I'm going for him every single week. I will definitely go for some different captaincy options at some point, I do assure you, but away to Sheffield United away, I'm sorry. I'm just going to go for who I think will score the most points, and once again, that's going to be Erling Haaland. The vice captaincy is a bit more difficult. I think Martinelli, Fernandes and Rashford all have a great shout, and I think it's definitely between Saka and Rashford, and I'm currently going for the more informed player, and also I think Arsenal have a more high ceiling against Fulham at home, just because they still have shown more consistency in the attack compared to Man United, who sometimes really struggle to score that second goal and to really kill games off. So it's going to be a difficult one this week in terms of the captaincy or vice captaincy, but in the end it's going to be Erling Haaland as a solid captaincy choice. FPL.team and all the algorithms I've checked so far are very favourable with my team in Game Week 3, and I'm fairly confident of a decent score and an improvement upon what happened in Game Week 2. So 65.7 would be a pretty good score, and I'm actually expecting a little bit more than that. So I'm not sure where this confidence is coming from, but I'm just saying it out loud. In terms of Game Week 4, this is where the big issues will arise, because I'll have 2 free transfers if I decide not to use my free transfer in Game Week 3, as I discussed in this video. But it's just a case of which midfielders do I go to and which midfielders do I sell, because I could bring in Phil Foden and Mbeumo. I'd be quite happy with those transfers, especially Mbeumo. But then who do I sell? And at this moment in time, I'd be very happy to sell both Bruno Fernandes and Rashford, but that could easily be Martinelli or Mitoma making way as well. And the original plan was to sell Mitoma and Fernandes and then bring in an Mbeumo and Foden / Maddison, which could still yet happen, but I'm just keeping my options open. I think my defence can be untouched for the time being. The same goes for the goalkeepers and the forwards, but the midfield needs to be bolstered, and I need to diversify it a little bit. The double-ups in Arsenal and Man United simply haven't worked yet, and they could all return very well in Game Week 3, but I still think it could be an issue in the medium to long term, and I definitely have to change things up a little bit in that area of the pitch. And we'll talk more about Game Week 4 as we get to it, but there are some clear issues in the squad. Estupinian and Mitoma facing Newcastle at home, you would expect a low ceiling there. Onana away to Arsenal, probably a slim chance of a clean sheet. And then you look at 2 Arsenal midfielders facing Onana, that is a clash already. And Watkins away to Liverpool, I think he could actually be pretty decent, but the fixture itself doesn't look great on paper. So all of a sudden, despite Mbeumo and Foden looking like good acquisitions by that time, it doesn't look like the best squad, and the expected points figure does drop quite significantly to 57.5 in Game Week 4. So I think this team won't be as great for sure in Game Week 4 on paper, but I'm fairly confident of what I could do in Game Week 3, and that's where I'm expecting to get a green arrow and start to make some progress yet again. The final thing I wanted to show you is Drafthound, which I have been using extensively since the summer. There is a link to join them in the description below. I would firstly encourage you to try out the free tools, and then if you want access to all the different things you can use, such as the fixture analysis, the assistant manager, then that's where you can become a pro pay tier member. So this algorithm has suggested for me to vice captain Saka, captain Haaland, and it also has gone for Onana over Turner. Pretty standard stuff, but also there are some really good transfer recommendations. So there's still going to be a lot of you watching who will still be insistent on selling Bruno Fernandes. And in terms of my own team situation, the budget, if I were to sell him, the players that Drafthound recommends include Foden. I think that's a pretty smart choice, but in terms of expected points, very similar to Bruno Fernandes in Game Week 3, so that it could be a bit of a concern. And the other player it recommends is Mbeumo, who, they're 2 players I'm looking to bring in Game Week 4, so maybe the algorithm is kind of in line with my own thinking. But I look at that sort of transfer and I don't see too many gains in Game Week 3. As good as Phil Foden is, and I think Man City will score 3 goals probably against Sheffield United, it still isn't going to be a massive difference, I think, between him and Bruno Fernandes. Maybe I'm going to be completely wrong. Man United struggle yet again and Fernandes blanks, and he's just going to be another source of frustration for yet another week. So football's unpredictable. You just never know what will happen. But in my opinion, things change very quickly, and the Man United players were villains last week. They could become absolute heroes this time round and punish sellers. So let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Do you think Fernandes and Rashford are worth keeping for one more week? I put polls out on the community tab if you subscribe to the channel, and check the community tab there on YouTube. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it or found it useful, then be sure to smash the like button and subscribe for new. We're around 20 subscribers away from 19,000, so let's try to get to that milestone by this weekend. It's certainly possible. You can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, and check all the links in the description below for the Patreon, channel memberships, Discord server, the FPL League, and Drafthound. I'd highly recommend you check out all of those links down in the description below. I wish you all the best luck for Game Week 3, and I hope you enjoy the football as always, and I'll see you next time.